The SEAL commander's verdict was cold. No one makes that shot. The words hung in the desert air, final as a gavel. At 3,000 yards, the math was supposed to collapse into impossibility. 4.2 seconds of flight time. A bullet destined to fall more than 150 in before it reached its mark. A drift of 35 in even after perfect wind calls. Everyone in the platoon knew the figures. Everyone. Except the woman they had nicknamed WRAITH. Riley Mercer didn't argue. She listened. Eyes steady, fingers brushing the worn edge of the notebook that lived in her rucksack. It was a diary no one else could read, angles scribbled beside, atmospheric tables, whispers of math, carved into the margins where Holloway saw an impossible shot. She saw coordinates waiting to align. Holloway folded his arms, the sun bleeding across his jawline. This is SEAL ground. Reckon. Only 3 clicks is a brag, not a mission parameter. Riley didn't flinch. Her reply was nothing, just the half-breath exhale she'd practiced until silence itself felt like an ally behind her. Elena adjusted the spotting scope, catching Holloway's eye. Sir, if those are the targets upstairs, and if they are who we think they are, 2 senior commanders, you don't get another window like this. Not in this war. Holloway's jaw worked, caught between doctrine and opportunity. The call from higher had been clear. Eyes only. Observe. Report. Exfil. But 3,000 yards was a number that didn't belong in doctrine at all. It belonged to legend, and legends made men uneasy. Riley set the Barrett M107A1 across her knees. The weapon looked oversized in her arms, but when her hands touched steel, it felt like a continuation of her pulse. A line of force waiting to be translated into history. The desert wind combed through the compound below. Somewhere inside, 2 enemy commanders were laughing. Above them, SEAL doctrine cracked against physics. And between them, a sniper prepared to make the impossible measurable. Where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. We read everyone. And if you don't want to miss the next hidden story, make sure to hit subscribe to Stories Unseen. The observation hide was stifling. A nest dug into rock and silence. Hours had bled into each other. Patterns tracked. Guard rotations mapped. Heat shimmer, turning the compound into a mirage. Holloway tapped his wrist. Impatience, ticking louder than the seekers. Reckon. Only, he muttered again, like repeating. It would turn the words into armor. But Keller's classified brief still echoed in the team's ears. Yes, only possible. HVT assembly, if confirmed, signal for escalation through her scope. Riley marked it with the calm precision of a craffer. 2 senior commanders, one a strategist, who had rebuilt supply chains from rubble, the other a battlefield tactician whose orders had already bled American patrols dry together. They were arteries in the insurgent body. Remove them and the entire network spasmed. 3,000 yards, Holloway repeated as though saying the number out loud would shrink it back into reality. You'd need a Forcer. Second prayer. Riley opened her notebook, its pages modeled with numbers that to anyone else looked like riddles. She ran her thumb across equations she had written weeks ago. Corollary drift. Subsonic transition thresholds. Mirage. Indexing. This was no prayer. This was physics given teeth. Elena leaned in, whispering. It's not a shot. It's a map. She's just following it. The commander turned sharply. And if she misses, do You know what 4 seconds buys them? Every guard in that compound on alert, every corridor sealed, extraction cut off. Riley finally spoke, her voice almost quieter than the desert air. 4 seconds. Buys me certainty. Not chance, not luck. Certainty. For a long moment, no one moved. The decision lived in Holloway's silence. Caught between orders carved in doctrine and the raw possibility that history could pivot in 14 seconds. Below them, 2 commanders raised glasses in a toast in the rocks above. WRAITH adjusted the rifle's bipod until the desert itself seemed to hold its breath. JSOC's directive sat in the air like a fuse: assess elimination possibilities and advise. The words remade the landscape for Commander Holloway, who'd spent 16 years learning how not to be surprised. The mission had just become a ledger of consequences. 3,000 yards is not a number, it's a fracture. It snaps doctrine into brittle pieces. It should have been a reconnaissance op. Now it was a question of whether the impossible could be bent into routine. Holloway leveled binoculars and studied the compound as if geometry might give him control. Ridge lines, roof lines, window frames. Everything was a vector. He pulled his gaze back to Riley Mercer, the sniper, lying under a ghillie veil, her body folded into stillness. The paperwork on Mercer said ordinary qualifications. The Admiral's seal said otherwise. Holloway felt bureaucratic gravity pulling one way. The old reflex of a field leader. Measuring risk pulling another. Riley did not speak in bravado. She offered data through her scope, through Elelenina's tablet, through clipped microphrases that stitched into the platoon's shared awareness. 2 men on the upper floor, windows facing northwest, gestures consistent with briefing maps spread across the table. 22 personnel on the perimeter, rotation pattern stable if you watched long enough. Thermal imaging confirms a meeting in progress. The numbers were a map. The map was a decision. Elena spoke in the language only Riley seemed fluent. In weather density layer winds. She tapped readings from the Kestrel, flicked the applied ballistics app, and built a 3-layer wind profile. 2 outsiders. It was a blur of metrics. To them, it was possibility. Surface wind 12 from northwest, she murmured. Shift at elevation, temperature 82, humidity 31, elevation delta 100 feet, mirage trending left. Her voice never spiked. The implication: did a 3,000 yards shot meant more than drop and hold over? It demanded the atmosphere itself become part of the equation. Holloway's lips shaped a question he didn't finish. He knew the variables: bullet drop measured in yards, drift in feet, time of flight in heartbeats. At 3,000 yards, even the Earth insisted on being part of the problem. The Coriolis effect crept into their work like an uninvited guest. Spin, drift, microthermals, barometric variance. Things ignored in classroom training now loomed as execution risks. You understand the physics involved? Holloway finally asked. The skepticism was armor, not attack. He had worked beside world-class shooters. He had seen numbers eat men alive at that range. You're fighting the planet as much as the enemy. Riley raised her chin. The scope framed her answer. She clicked a turret, exhaled half a breath, steadied the crosshairs. I do understand, she said, and I've modeled it. She didn't say, trust me. She said, I've modeled it. And that distinction carried weight. Holloway leaned closer, his doubt cracked by curiosity. Model how Riley pulled out a waterproof notebook thick with shorthand and columns of numbers, pages of trajectories annotated with corrections, diagrams, notations that looked less like field notes and more like physics. Homework carried into obsession. She let him look. The pages weren't magic, just labor, habit, and the stubborn belief that variables could be tamed. If we do nothing, they remain, she said, tapping where two profiles had been circled. If we move in, we risk detection and compromise. But if you want an option, she pointed at a curve tightened to a narrow spike. I can give you one around them. The platoon prepared in ritual silence. Radios checked. Exfil lanes rehearsed. Weapons cleaned in. Choreography. Holloway felt the decision hinge beneath him. Doctrine said, let it go. Strategy whispered, a single act could shatter an entire network. The Admiral's order had already bent the rules. Now Riley was offering a vector. Through the bend. Holloway swallowed. The weight of command pressing in. He looked at Riley, then Elena, then back to the glowing dots on the map. 2 senior commanders whose deaths might redraw the war. Outside, the desert wind shifted like a question. Inside, Riley's hand hovered over a page that turned math into fate. Talk me through the gaps, Holloway said. Not surrender. Permission. Riley exhaled and began. And as her first corrections left her lips, the entire world narrowed to a single line of sight. They had called it impossible until the first shot broke the silence. Riley Mercer moved through her ritual like a pianist, striking the opening key. No showmanship. No bravado, only precision. The world shrank to glass and reticle to the grammar of breath and trigger weight. Elena's tablet glowed with atmospheric numbers. Holloway pressed into the spotting scope, as though belief might bend physics. Around them, the platoon folded into stillness. Every operator a gear in the same tense machine, engaging in 15. Riley whispered flat, certain. Holloway's jaw tightened. The desert seemed to hold its breath. 3,000 yards. Stretched like a dare. 2 commanders. Framed in a window. 4 seconds of flight. Through gravity. Rotation drift. 14 seconds in which history might be rewritten. The first shot was not cinematic. It was surgical. The Barrett thundered, recoil slamming into her shoulder. A bullet the size of a finger sprinted through the invisible math of the desert. 4.2 seconds later, the strategist's chest erupted crimson. Glass shattered from his hand. He fell back without a cry. The weight of a campaign collapsing with him. The second shot came before shock had time to breathe. Riley cycled the bolt, muzzle braced, crosshair realigned. The tactician turned at the thud of his comrade's fall and never completed the motion. Another 4.2 seconds carried the round across the void. His head snapped forward into the table. Life extinguished before his hand reached the radio. 2 shots, 2 commanders, 14 seconds, an insurgent network. Decapitated for a heartbeat. The compound refused to comprehend. Silence pulsed through walls and corridors. The pause before realization strikes. Then panic detonated. Shouts, sirens, boots, hammering stairwells, radios shrieking. Impacts confirmed. Elena breathed, awe undercutting her discipline. Holloway's disbelief cracked into something darker. Reverence. Maybe fear. 3,000 yards, he muttered, as though naming the distance might make it less impossible. But Riley wasn't listening. She broke the rifle. Down with ritual efficiency. Steel. Folding into foam, scope-capped, case. Latched. The shots were already history. She moved with the certainty of someone who knew legends couldn't linger. Exfil. Now, she said. The seals shifted as one. An organism of shadows. They peeled from the hide, slipped across rock, boots. Silent on grit. Behind them, the compound shrieked like a hive disturbed. And then beyond the ridge movement, a silhouette lifted an arm, signaling. Deeper into the valley. Not random. Panic. Coordination. For a second, the desert froze again. The stillness after a Canerto's last note. Victory had lasted 14 seconds. Now, a new threat had entered the score. The team broke cover. A ballet of precision and urgency. Radios cracked with clipped commands. Boots struck in rhythm. Extraction lanes lit in their minds. Seconds weighed more than bullets. Riley didn't look back. She never did. What mattered had already been written into silence. 3,000 yards. 2 commanders, 14 seconds, and the proof that even the laws of distance could be bent by human will. Commander Holloway stayed close to her flank, still trying to comprehend what he had witnessed. 2 shots, 2 bodies, 14 seconds. He had fought long enough to know when a battle shifted, when history bent beneath invisible hands, and Riley's rifle had just carved a chapter no public ledger would ever admit existed. They reached the ridge, where the Seahawk waited, rotors shattering dawn into jagged noise. Dust swallowed the landing zone as the seals boarded and practiced rhythm. Riley lingered for a heartbeat, her eyes fixed on the horizon as if measuring something far beyond coordinates. Holloway's voice cut through the roar. Sergeant, what do I even tell command? How do I write this? Riley snapped her case shut. The Barrett already folded into anonymity. Her reply was steady, stripped of triumph. You tell them it was reconnaissance. Nothing more. The word stung Holloway. He remembered Keller's caution before deployment reports are written for politics, not for truth. Now, he understood. Hours later, as the Seahawk banked across the desert, the cabin's red light washed the team in muted glow. Riley sat still, hands folded as though she had only signed a form. But the glances traded among the seals betrayed what silence could not hide or tangled with unease. They had witnessed something that rewrote doctrine, and none of them knew how to live with it. 3 months on, intelligence confirmed the ripple of her bullets. The enemy's command structure collapsed overnight. Faction splintered. Resistance dissolved. Whole region shifted without another firefight. Official analysts wrote about attrition and supply degradation. Sterile phrases that erased the ridge, the crosshairs, and the woman who had ended it all in 14 heartbeats. Her name stayed buried in the black archives. Her files stamped routine. No medals, no ceremonies. Yet, whispers traveled faster than any combination. WRAITH. A call sign. Repeated in the classified corridors. Invoked like a warning or a prayer. Clearance meant you could read the record, but understanding belonged only to those who had seen her work. Holloway rose in rank, shaping sealed doctrine for a generation, but he never forgot. The moment disbelief cracked into awe. The silence after 2 impossible shots. To every trainee who asked about limits, he gave the same lesson: range is not only measured in yards, it is measured in will. And Riley, she kept moving deeper into the dark. Rifle always one step ahead of history. Her shots would never echo on parade grounds, but their consequences redrew maps. In the end, the official record told a different story, that no rounds were fired. That the mission was recon only, but in a vault no public would ever see. One line remained: 2 shots, 2 commanders. 1 soldier who made the impossible inevitable. That was her legacy. That was the truth that outlasted the war.